In the deep expanse of the galaxy, where no one feared anything, there was one species that stood out. The Arthax were known for their terrifying strength, their ability to travel across galaxies in the blink of an eye, and their unrivaled intelligence. They had conquered many worlds and fought battles against powerful enemies, but there was one planet, one world that made them tremble with fear. This world was Earth. The Arthax, despite their might, had always kept a careful distance from Earth. The leaders spoke of it in hushed tones, warning their people about the dangers it posed. No one knew why, and most were too afraid to ask. The fear of Earth had been ingrained in them for centuries, passed down through generations like an ancient curse that no one dared to break. For the first time in history, an Arthax commander, Krilthar, stood before his council and decided it was time to learn the truth behind this strange fear. Krilthar's voice echoed in the dark chamber as he spoke to his people. We must understand what makes Earth so powerful, so dangerous. It is time we stop hiding from this mystery and face it head-on. His words stirred confusion and unease among the council members. They had all heard the warnings. Earth was nothing like the other planets they had encountered. It was different, and that difference was what terrified them. But what exactly made it so frightening? The council members exchanged uneasy glances. What if the legends are true? One of them whispered, what if the humans on Earth have abilities we cannot comprehend? Another voice added, we've always been told to avoid Earth, to never go near it. But why? What happened there? Krilthar's eyes narrowed as he looked at the faces of his fellow leaders. They all seemed to fear the unknown. But Krilthar was not like them. He was determined to uncover the truth. He was going to learn what made Earth so dangerous, no matter the cost. He ordered his most trusted soldiers to prepare for a mission, to investigate Earth and bring back answers. This was no ordinary task. The galaxy's first species, the Arthax, had never been sent to explore Earth before. There had been rumors, stories from those who had ventured close to the planet, but none of them had returned with anything concrete, only whispers of something strange, something terrifying. The mission was risky. Krilthar knew that, but he was ready to take the chance. He knew that in order to maintain the Arthax's dominance in the galaxy, he had to understand Earth. He had to know what made it such a threat. The mission was set in motion, and the team of Arthax explorers prepared to travel to the distant planet. They were armed with the most advanced technology their species had ever created, confident that they could handle whatever Earth threw at them. As the explorers made their way toward Earth, they noticed something odd. The space around them seemed to warp and shift, like the very fabric of reality was being pulled in different directions. It was as though the planet itself was alive, resisting their approach. The Arthax had encountered many strange phenomena in their travels, but this was unlike anything they had ever experienced. The closer they got to Earth, the stronger the feeling became. It was as if the planet was watching them, waiting for them to arrive. When they finally reached the outskirts of Earth's atmosphere, the explorers couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The planet below was a simple blue world, just like any other, but there was something more to it. Something that made their hearts race. The ship's sensors began to malfunction, and communication with their home base became impossible. The explorers were cut off from their people, trapped in a strange alien place with no way to call for help. As the ship descended toward the surface, the crew was on edge. They could feel the tension building in the air. What awaited them on Earth? What was the truth behind the fear that had haunted the Arthax for so long? The answers were just below them, hidden beneath the planet's surface, waiting to be uncovered. The moment they landed, the crew stepped out into the unknown. The air on Earth was different. It was thicker, heavier, filled with an energy that none of the Arthax had ever felt before. The landscape was peaceful, almost serene, but there was an unsettling feeling in the air. The trees seemed to whisper in the wind. The animals watched them closely with eyes that seemed to understand them, and the ground beneath their feet felt alive. It was a strange, foreign world that seemed to pulse with a power they couldn't explain. The explorers knew they had to be careful. They had no idea what they were dealing with, and they couldn't afford to underestimate the planet or its inhabitants. The first few hours on Earth were uneventful. They set up camp in a quiet clearing, scanning the environment for any signs of danger. But as night fell, things began to change. The darkness was not like the darkness they had encountered on other worlds. It was deeper, more oppressive, as if the night itself had a will of its own. The Arthax soldiers began to feel uneasy, their instincts telling them that something was wrong. It was as though the very stars above them were watching, waiting for them to make the wrong move. One of the soldiers, a young Arthax named Zuckle, was the first to hear the noise. It was faint at first, like a distant hum, but as the sound grew louder, it became impossible to ignore. The ground beneath their feet began to shake, and the trees swayed as if something massive was approaching. The explorers' weapons were ready, but none of them could shake the feeling that no weapon in the galaxy could protect them from whatever was coming. The noise grew louder, and then, out of the darkness, it appeared. A figure, tall and cloaked in shadows, stood at the edge of the clearing. The explorers froze, staring at the figure with a mix of awe and fear. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The figure was human, but it radiated an energy that felt ancient and powerful. The air around it seemed to ripple, like the fabric of reality itself was bending in its presence. The Arthax soldiers knew they were not dealing with an ordinary human. This was something far more dangerous. The figure did not speak, but its eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the darkness. For a moment, there was complete silence. The only sound was the distant hum that had brought them here. The figure then raised its hand, and the hum grew louder, filling the air with a strange, vibrating force. The Arthax soldiers tried to react, but it was as if their bodies were frozen in place. They could not move. They could not fight. The figure took a step forward, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. The Arthax soldiers could feel the power emanating from it, an ancient primal energy that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. The human figure did not need words to communicate. It was clear that they were not welcome. They were intruders on this world, and Earth had made its message clear. Krilthar's heart raced as he realized that everything he had feared about Earth was true. This planet was not like any other. It was alive with a force beyond their comprehension. The Arthax had made a grave mistake by coming here. They had underestimated Earth, and now they would pay the price. The figure in the shadows slowly stepped back into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The ground stopped shaking, and the air grew still once more. The Arthax soldiers were left standing in the clearing, shaken to their core. They had witnessed something they could not explain. The fear they had felt before was no longer just a story, it was a reality. Krilthar knew that this was only the beginning. The truth about Earth was more terrifying than he could have ever imagined, and the galaxy's first species would soon learn that there were forces on this planet far beyond their control. The team of Arthax explorers stood in silence, their hearts pounding with the weight of what they had just experienced. Krilthar, the leader, was the first to speak, his voice trembling slightly despite his usual calm composure. "We have underestimated Earth. This place. It's unlike anything we have encountered before. That human, it was not just a human. It was something more, something ancient." Zuckle, the young Arthax soldier, glanced around nervously. "Commander, what do we do now?" That being was too powerful. It's like it knew we were coming. How can we fight something like that? Krilthar's eyes hardened. "We don't fight. Not yet. We need to understand what's happening here. That figure, it wasn't an ordinary human. There's something else on this planet, something that even the Arthax fear. We need to uncover the truth, no matter the cost." But the truth was not going to be easy to find. As the night wore on, the team's unease grew. The planet itself seemed to pulse with an energy that made their very skin crawl. The air was thick, as though it was alive, watching them, waiting for them to make a move. The longer they stayed on Earth, the more they felt like intruders in a world that wasn't meant for them. The next day, Krilthar ordered the team to venture deeper into the forest, hoping to find something that would explain the strange events of the previous night. They moved cautiously, scanning the environment for any signs of danger. But the deeper they went, the more it became clear that Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was watching them. As they walked, Zikal noticed something strange. The trees around them seemed to move, not in the way that trees sway in the wind, but as if they were shifting, growing in response to their presence. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with every step they took, as if the very earth itself was alive. It was a sensation that none of the Arthax had ever felt before. It was unnerving, and it made Zikal's heart race with fear. "We're not alone," Zikal whispered, his voice barely audible. "Something is here, watching us." Krilthar nodded grimly. "I feel it too. Earth is not just a world. It's a force. We need to find out what it is and why the Arthax have been so afraid of it for so long." They pressed on, determined to uncover whatever secret Earth was hiding. But as they moved deeper into the forest, they began to notice something else. The animals. The creatures of Earth seemed to be watching them from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They did not flee at the sight of the explorers. Instead, they stood still, observing, waiting. It was as though they knew the Arthax were not of this world, and they were not happy about it. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the trees. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the sky above seemed to darken. The explorers turned to see a massive creature charging toward them from the forest. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a beast with the body of a lion, but with wings like an eagle and eyes that burned with a fierce, intelligent light. The creature roared, its voice shaking the very air around them. The Arthax soldiers raised their weapons, but they knew, deep down, that no weapon they had could stop this creature. It was too powerful, too wild, too connected to the planet itself. The creature lunged at them, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. But just as it was about to strike, a wave of energy surged through the ground, and the creature froze in midair. For a moment, everything was still. The creature hung motionless, suspended in the air as if it had been trapped by some invisible force. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. The energy dissipated, and the creature fell to the ground, no longer a threat. Krilthar stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. What just happened? What was that thing? Zikal was still shaking. It was like the planet itself protected us. But why? Why would Earth protect us? Krilthar stared down at the ground, his mind racing. This planet is more powerful than we imagined. It is alive, and it is not simply a world of resources and creatures. It has a consciousness, a will of its own, and we are trespassers here. The team continued their journey, their fear growing with every step. They couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was watching them, judging them, and they didn't know how much longer they could survive in this strange, hostile place. They were no longer sure if their mission was about exploration or survival. As the days passed, the team found more evidence of Earth's strange power. The plants, the animals, even the very land itself seemed to possess an intelligence, a force that could shape reality. The explorers discovered ancient ruins buried deep in the earth, remnants of a civilization long forgotten by the galaxy. The ruins were covered in symbols and markings that none of the Arthax could understand, but they felt a strange pull toward them, as if the ruins themselves were calling to them. It was in one of these ruins that they made their most shocking discovery yet. Buried beneath the stone, deep in the earth, they found a relic, a glowing crystalline object that hummed with energy. The moment they touched it, the ground shook violently, and the air grew thick with power. The object was alive, its energy radiating out like a wave, filling the explorers with an overwhelming sense of dread. "This is it," Krilthar said, his voice hoarse. "This is what we've been searching for. This is the source of the fear that has haunted the Arthax for so long." But before they could investigate further, the relic began to pulse with a blinding light. The explorers had no choice but to retreat, the force of the energy almost too much to bear. They fled back to their ship, their minds reeling from what they had just uncovered. As they prepared to leave Earth, Krilthar realized that they had only scratched the surface of the truth. Earth was not just a planet. It was a living, breathing entity with a power far beyond anything the Arthax had ever imagined. The galaxy's first species had feared Earth for a reason, and now Krilthar knew why. But the question remained, was Earth truly a threat, or was it simply misunderstood? The Arthax had learned more than they had bargained for, but the answers they sought were still out of reach, and as they left the planet behind, Krilthar couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was watching them, waiting for them to return. This was only the beginning of the mystery, and Krilthar knew that the truth would be far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined. The Arthax had discovered the dark history of Earth, but they still had no idea what the planet would do next. The Arthax explorers were now faced with a harsh reality that was slowly sinking in. Their initial approach to Earth had been filled with confidence and curiosity, but the truth they had uncovered was far more terrifying than they had anticipated. As they departed the planet, their minds were filled with a constant, gnawing uncertainty. What was this planet? What was its true power? And why had the galaxy's first species feared it for so long? The moment they left Earth's atmosphere, Krilthar sent a transmission back to their home base. The mission had failed. It was clear that the Arthax were not prepared for the strange, powerful force that lay within Earth. The relic they had discovered in the ruins was a key part of the mystery, but the full scope of its power was still unknown. "We need to get back to base and analyze the data," Krilthar said, his voice cold, filled with a sense of urgency. "The galaxy is not prepared for what we've uncovered. Earth is not just a planet. It's a living force, and we're only scratching the surface of its potential." The crew was silent, processing the gravity of the situation. Zikal was the first to speak. "Commander, are we going to tell the Council about what we found? About the relic and the creatures? The power on Earth, it's beyond anything we've seen before." Krilthar nodded. "We must tell them, but we must be careful. The Council will want to take immediate action, but we cannot risk provoking Earth. Not yet. We need more information, more data. And most importantly, we need to understand that relic. It's the key." The ship's journey back to the Arthax home base was tense, the crew feeling the weight of their failure. The planet they had hoped to explore was now an enigma, a mystery too dangerous to solve without knowing more. But as they approached their base, an unexpected event occurred. A sudden wave of energy shot through space, and the ship shook violently. "What is happening?" Zikal shouted, gripping the nearest console. "We're being pulled back," Krilthar exclaimed. "It's Earth. It's reacting to us." The ship was no longer in control. The gravitational pull of Earth was too strong, and before they knew it, they were being pulled toward the planet once more, helpless against its force. Krilthar ordered the crew to prepare for a crash landing, but they all knew it was too late. There was no escaping the pull of Earth now. With a thunderous crash, the ship slammed into the planet's surface. The ground shook as the Arthax explorers were thrown from their seats. When the dust finally settled, the crew was dazed but alive. They quickly assessed their surroundings. The crash site was deep in a dense forest, far from their original landing zone. It was as though Earth itself had chosen this location for them, forcing them to land in a place that felt completely foreign, even more so than before. Krilthar's eyes scanned the horizon, his mind racing. Earth was not done with them yet. The planet had brought them back, and now it was clear that the answers they sought would not be handed to them. Earth was challenging them, pushing them to uncover the truth behind its mysterious power. The relic they had found was no longer just a piece of ancient history. It was the key to understanding the planet's strength. But how would they unlock its secrets? "We need to find shelter and regroup," Krilthar said. "We will not survive out here for long without supplies." The team began to gather what they could from the wreckage of the ship, but it was clear that their resources were limited. The forest around them seemed to stretch on endlessly, a thick, tangled mess of trees and underbrush. It was as if the forest was closing in on them, trapping them in its depths. As they made their way through the forest, they encountered more signs of Earth's strange power. The plants around them seemed to move of their own accord, their leaves rustling as though they were whispering. The animals, too, watched them with unnerving intelligence, their eyes following the explorers with a knowing gaze. It was as though everything on Earth was connected, working in unison to keep the Arthax from uncovering the planet's deepest secrets. Hours passed, and the team found a small clearing where they decided to set up camp. But even as they prepared their makeshift shelter, the sense of dread that had plagued them since their arrival on Earth never left. The planet's energy hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Krilthar sat alone by the campfire, staring into the flickering flames. His mind was racing with questions. What was this relic they had found? Why had Earth brought them back? What was it trying to tell them? He couldn't shake the feeling that the planet was guiding them, pushing them towards something they weren't yet ready to understand. "Commander," Zikal said, interrupting his thoughts, "I don't think we should stay here much longer. This place, it feels like it's watching us." Krilthar looked up at him, his face grim. "I know, but we have no choice. We need to find out what's really going on here, and we need to understand that relic. It's the only way we're going to get the answers we need." As the night wore on, the sounds of the forest grew louder, more intense. The wind picked up, and the trees seemed to sway in unison, as though responding to some unseen force. The energy in the air was thick, almost palpable, and the Arthax explorers could feel it creeping into their bones. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the forest, followed by a deep, rumbling sound that shook the ground beneath their feet. The campfire flickered, and then went out, plunging them into darkness. "What was that?" Zikal whispered, his voice filled with fear. "I don't know," Krilthar replied, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "But we're not alone." And then out of the darkness it appeared again. The figure, the human figure they had encountered before. This time it was not alone. There were others, standing in the shadows, their eyes glowing with that same intense light. The figure stepped forward, and once again, the air around them seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, and a sense of overwhelming power filled the clearing. The human spoke, their voice soft but filled with an unearthly authority. "You have come far, but you do not understand," the figure said. "Earth is not a planet to be explored. It is a living force, and it will not be controlled." Krilthar's heart raced as he took in the figure's words. He had known Earth was powerful, but he had not realized the extent of that power. The planet was alive, and it was not going to let the Arthax leave until they understood its true nature. "We are not here to control," Krilthar said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "We are here to understand. We need to know what you are, what this planet is. The relic, it's the key. Tell us what it means." The figure remained silent for a moment, and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it raised its hand. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the forest seemed to come alive with energy. The trees swayed violently, their branches reaching out as if to touch the explorers. "You will know soon enough," the figure said, its voice now tinged with an eerie finality. "But be warned, the truth you seek is not one that can be easily understood. Earth does not share its secrets lightly." As quickly as it had appeared, the figure and its companions vanished into the darkness, leaving the Arthax explorers in stunned silence. The night had grown even darker, and the sense of danger was now more palpable than ever. Krilthar knew that they were running out of time. The answers were close, but the questions they had asked were too dangerous. Earth was no longer just a world they were exploring. It was a force they were fighting, and the cost of their curiosity would be higher than they could imagine. The atmosphere was heavy with tension as the Arthax explorers sat in the eerie silence of the clearing. The forest around them seemed to press in, as though the very trees were listening to their every word. The figure, the strange human who had appeared before them, had warned them. Earth was not just a planet. It was alive, and it had its own will, its own consciousness. The relic they had found in the ruins, the object that had drawn them here in the first place, was part of something much bigger, much older than they could comprehend. Krilthar paced restlessly around the campfire. The words of the human still echoed in his mind. Earth is not a planet to be explored. It is a living force, and it will not be controlled. The arrogance of the Arthax had led them to this point. They had come to Earth expecting to conquer it, to understand its power, but now they were at the mercy of something far more dangerous than they had imagined. Zuckle, still visibly shaken by the encounter, approached Krilthar cautiously. "Commander, do you think they were telling the truth? Earth, alive? It sounds impossible. How could a planet have consciousness?" Krilthar stopped pacing and turned to face his young soldier. "I don't know, Zuckle, but we've seen too much to ignore it. We felt it ourselves. The energy in the air, the way the planet reacts to our presence. Earth is not like any world we've encountered before. It has power and intelligence, and it has made it clear that it does not want us here." "But why?" Zuckle asked, confusion in his voice. "Why bring us back after we left? Why not just destroy us if it's so powerful?" Krilthar frowned, deep in thought. He understood the fear that his soldiers were feeling. This was not the mission they had signed up for. This was no longer about exploration or discovery. This was about survival. "I think it's trying to teach us something," he said slowly. "Earth didn't destroy us when it had the chance. It could have, but it didn't. Instead, it showed us the relic. It gave us a glimpse of its power. Maybe Earth is waiting for us to understand its purpose before it decides what to do with us." As the night grew colder, the forest around them seemed to become even more alive. Strange, glowing creatures flitted between the trees, their eyes shining in the darkness, watching the Arthax explorers closely. The animals, the trees, the very earth beneath their feet. It all felt as though it was breathing, moving in sync with some unseen rhythm. The feeling of being watched, of being out of place, was overwhelming. Krilthar stood up straight and addressed the group. "We can't stay here much longer. Earth has shown us that it doesn't want us here, but it hasn't given us an answer yet. We need to find the source of this power. We need to uncover the truth before it's too late." The explorers quickly packed up their camp and began to move deeper into the forest, knowing that their time on Earth was running out. They had no idea what to expect, but they had no choice but to press on. They had to find the answers. Hours passed, and the deeper they ventured into the forest, the stranger things became. The trees began to thin, replaced by vast, open spaces filled with tall grasses that seemed to sway in rhythm with the wind. In the distance, they could see a faint glow, a soft light coming from the heart of the forest. "This way," Krilthar ordered. "Follow the light. It may lead us to the source of Earth's power." The team moved toward the glowing light, their steps slow and cautious. Every sound, every movement in the forest seemed amplified, as though the very air around them was alive with energy. As they neared the source of the light, they found themselves standing at the edge of a massive, ancient structure, hidden deep in the heart of the forest. The structure was unlike anything the Arthax had ever seen. It was made of stone, but the stones themselves seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. The architecture was complex, intricate, and strangely organic, as though the building had grown naturally from the earth itself. "This is it," Krilthar said, his voice filled with awe and fear. "This must be the place. This is where the power is coming from." The team approached the structure cautiously, their weapons at the ready. As they moved closer, they felt the ground beneath their feet vibrate with the energy emanating from the building. It was as though the structure was alive, responding to their presence. Krilthar hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do next. "We need to enter," he said finally. "We've come this far, and we're not leaving without the answers." The entrance to the structure was large, an archway that seemed to stretch into the darkness beyond. The light from within flickered, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. Without another word, Krilthar stepped forward, followed by the rest of the team. The air inside the structure was thick with power, the energy so strong it made the explorers' heads spin. The walls seemed to pulse, as though they were alive, and the further they went inside, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. It was as if the very stones of the building were judging them, measuring their worth. In the center of the structure, they found a large chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings and symbols that none of them could decipher. In the middle of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop the pedestal rested the relic, a glowing crystal that pulsed with energy. The relic was the same one they had found in the ruins, but now it seemed to be calling to them, its light brighter, its hum louder. Krilthar approached the relic slowly, feeling a strange pull toward it. The moment his hand touched the crystal, a surge of energy rushed through him, filling his body with an overwhelming sense of power. His vision blurred, and he saw flashes of images. Images of a world far older than Earth, of a civilization long gone, and of a force that had shaped the entire galaxy. The images were chaotic, fragmented, but they told a story of Earth's role in the universe, a story of how it had been at the center of an ancient war between forces beyond comprehension. The force within the relic was ancient, and it spoke to him in a language he couldn't understand. But the message was clear. Earth was not just a planet. It was the heart of a forgotten power, a power that had been dormant for eons, but was now awakening. Earth had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself, and Krilthar had unknowingly triggered that moment. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, a voice he recognized. The figure, the human, had spoken again. "You have awakened what should have remained asleep. The power of Earth is not to be controlled. You, too, will become part of it, whether you want to or not." Krilthar staggered back, releasing the relic as if it had burned him. The energy from the crystal subsided, but the weight of what he had seen lingered in his mind. Earth was not just alive. It was a nexus of unimaginable power, and the Arthax had unknowingly walked into the heart of that power. The room seemed to close in on them, the walls shifting as if they were alive. The energy around them grew stronger, more oppressive. The structure was reacting to their presence, and it was clear that Earth was not done with them yet. It had shown them the truth, but it had also shown them the consequences of their interference. The Arthax were no longer just explorers. They were part of something much larger, something that could not be undone. The question now was whether they would survive the consequences of awakening Earth's power, or whether Earth itself would decide their fate. Krilthar's mind raced as he ordered the team to retreat. "We need to leave now. Earth has shown us what it is. We can't stay here. The power we've unleashed is beyond our control." As they turned to leave, the ground beneath them trembled once more, and the voice of the human figure echoed through the chamber one last time. "You will not leave until you understand. Earth will have its answers." And with that, the explorers realized that their journey had only just begun. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Krilthar and his team hurried through the dark corridors of the ancient structure. The energy from the relic still buzzed in the air, thick and powerful, but it was no longer a quiet hum. It was a constant roar, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The walls, which had once seemed solid and unyielding, now appeared to pulse and shift, as though the very structure of Earth was reacting to their presence. Krilthar's mind raced, processing the fragments of information he had seen within the relic's strange visions. Earth was no ordinary planet. It was a nexus of power, a living, breathing force that had shaped the galaxy in ways that the Arthax had never understood. The images of ancient civilizations, long-forgotten wars, and powers beyond comprehension had overwhelmed him. He had seen Earth's role in that forgotten history, a role that made it clear why the galaxy's first species had feared this world for so long. He had hoped for answers, but now all he felt was a deep, unsettling dread. The power of Earth was beyond anything the Arthax had encountered. The relic had not only shown them its power, it had marked them. They were now part of Earth's story, caught in the web of its ancient, unstoppable force. "Commander, we have to leave." Zikul's voice broke through Krilthar's thoughts. "It's getting worse. The energy is overwhelming. We're not going to make it out if we don't hurry." Krilthar nodded sharply, trying to shake off the panic that threatened to take hold of him. He could feel it too, the crushing weight of Earth's power pressing down on him, the oppressive force that seemed to grow stronger the closer they got to the entrance. The forest outside had become even more alive, more hostile. They had seen the strange creatures that now seemed to circle the structure, their glowing eyes watching them like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. "There's no time to waste," Krilthar ordered. "We need to get back to the ship now." But as they rushed down the corridors toward the exit, something unexpected happened. The walls of the structure seemed to close in, blocking their path. The stone that had once felt so solid now seemed to be shifting, moving as though it were alive. A deep rumbling sound echoed from deep within the structure, and the floor beneath their feet quaked violently. "What's happening?" Zikul shouted, fear creeping into his voice. Krilthar's heart raced. "It's Earth. It's not letting us leave." The energy around them flared, and suddenly, the air was thick with a tangible force, something they couldn't explain but felt in every fiber of their being. It was as if the planet was wrapping them in its grip, not just to keep them from leaving, but to show them that they were part of something much larger than themselves. Then, as if responding to their fear, the voice of the human figure echoed once again in Krilthar's mind. "You will not leave until you understand. Earth will have its answers." The words sent a chill down Krilthar's spine. The human had said it before, but now it felt more like a command than a warning. Earth had shown them the relic, had revealed the truth, and now it demanded something from them. It was no longer just a world to be explored. It was a force to be reckoned with, and Earth would not let them go until they had uncovered all its secrets. "We need to understand," Krilthar muttered to himself, the weight of the realization settling in. He had been right all along. Earth was not just a planet, it was a weapon. And the relic, the strange glowing crystal, was the key to unlocking its power. But what kind of weapon was it? What had it been used for in the past? They finally reached the main exit of the structure, only to find that the forest outside had changed. The trees, once standing tall and unmoving, now seemed to have shifted, their trunks twisted into strange shapes. The animals had become more aggressive, their eyes glowing brightly in the dark. The air was thick with an energy that made it feel as though the very earth beneath them was alive and watching. "Commander, we can't fight this," Zikul said, panic creeping into his voice. "We're not prepared for this. We need to get back to the ship before it's too late." Krilthar turned to his team, his face grim. "There's no escaping now. Earth has marked us. We can't leave until we know what it wants. And that means understanding the power behind the relic." He knew that their situation had become much more dangerous than he had anticipated. The planet had shown them its power, but it had also made it clear that it would not release them until they had uncovered the truth. The team moved forward, their steps heavy with the weight of their failure. They had come to Earth to explore, to understand its power. But now they were trapped, caught in a struggle that was far bigger than they had ever imagined. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they began to notice strange symbols carved into the trees, marks that seemed to pulse with the same energy that surrounded the relic. The air around them hummed with an unseen force, and the ground beneath them seemed to shift with every step. "We need to find the source of this power," Krilthar said, determination setting into his voice. The relic is the key, and we need to understand what it's trying to tell us. As they moved forward, the ground suddenly gave way beneath them, and they found themselves falling into a deep chasm. The air was thick with the power of Earth, and the walls of the chasm were lined with the same strange symbols that had marked the trees. It was as though they had entered the heart of the planet itself. The fall was sudden, and the team was scattered as they hit the ground. Krilthar quickly got to his feet, shaking off the shock. He looked around and saw that they had landed in a vast underground chamber. The walls of the chamber were lined with ancient stone carvings, and in the center of the room was a massive, glowing crystal. "This is it," Krilthar said softly. "This is the source of Earth's power." The crystal pulsed with an energy so intense that it made their skin tingle. It was the same energy they had felt when they first encountered the relic, but now it was magnified, stronger, almost overwhelming. Krilthar could feel the pull of the crystal, as though it were calling to him, drawing him in. "This is what Earth has been hiding," he whispered. "This is the heart of the planet." But before he could approach the crystal, the voice of the human figure echoed in his mind once more. "You have found the heart, but now you must understand its purpose. Only then will Earth allow you to leave." Krilthar stepped forward, his hand reaching toward the crystal. He knew this was the moment. This was the key to everything, the answers they had sought, the reason Earth had brought them here. But as his fingers brushed against the crystal, a surge of energy shot through him, and his vision blurred. Images flooded his mind, visions of an ancient war, of civilizations rising and falling, of Earth at the center of it all. The power of the planet was not just a weapon. It was a force of creation, a force that had shaped the very fabric of the galaxy. Earth had been the center of a war that spanned across countless worlds, a war that had ended in the planet's isolation. The relic, the crystal, it was a key to this forgotten history, a history that was now being brought to light. Krilthar staggered back, overwhelmed by the flood of information. The energy from the crystal was too much for him to comprehend. But one thing was clear: Earth had chosen them for a reason. They had come seeking knowledge, but what they had found was far beyond what they could ever have imagined. "We've uncovered the truth," Krilthar said, his voice hoarse. "But the price is far greater than we ever realized." As the crystal's energy surged once more, Krilthar realized that they were no longer just explorers. They were part of a much larger story, a story of Earth's power and the consequences of awakening it. The galaxy's first species had feared this planet for a reason, and now Krilthar and his team would pay the price for their curiosity. The question was no longer whether they could escape. It was whether they could survive long enough to understand the full extent of the power they had unleashed. Earth had shown them the truth. Now it would be up to them to decide what to do with it. And the planet was watching.